Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Need to Nerd. I'm your host, Spencer, celebrating a Super Bowl win by the Patriots, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Mason Clark.
What up,
Michael
Cleveland?
Merrill.
How's it going?
I interrupt. What were you going to say?
I said, isn't the Cleveland Rams? Isn't that the team that got second?
No.
Los Angeles?
Yeah.
Woo! Second time's a charm, just like them in the Super Bowl. Give it up. Cheers.
Actually, they've now lost to the Patriots in their last two Super Bowls.
That's what I'm saying. Obviously,
right.
I knew that. I'm a big sports guy.
And Wes Singleton.
Hey, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. The cast is all here. What's up?
Not much.
How was Sundance?
Well, actually, I was at Slam Dance. It's the offshoot of Sundance.
Got
it's
it.
Like, it's actually the indie festival versus Sundance, which is kind of slowly moving away from that. It's more like they have a hard nothing over $1 million budget. And it's typically stuff that's a lot more experimental or just subject matter that you like wouldn't typically see it at Sundance, but still like really good stuff.
So it's for the people who would have liked Sundance before it was cool?
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, it's like it's more for like actual low budget versus like Hollywood low budget, which most Sundance films are like 10 to well, not all of them. There are exceptions, but like the major ones you hear about are often like a couple $1 million and still have quite a bit of budget behind them. Whereas Slam Dance, like there's some real indie stuff in there. Like,
Did you hear about what happened to Gwyneth Paltrow up here?
No.
She was skiing before Sundance and ran into a man and broke his spine in 5 places.
Jesus.
And she's getting sued for a lot of money.
Well, of all the things she was going to get sued for, like...
Fair enough.
Not the one I'd expect.
Don't forget to...
I did hear oh my gosh, I'm blanking. I don't remember what show it was, but there was I'll have to look it up. But there was a black actor who went to Chicago, or I'm not sure. I wish I had more details on the story, but I know that during Sundance, there was a black actor who's on a bigger TV show. I'm not super into TV, so I wasn't following it as much, but who, like, as soon as he got into the city, got, like, attacked. And it was,
horrible.
like, very racial, and he's real, like critical condition, and yeah, so Sundance, there was all kinds of, like, crazy news stories like that going around.
It's a mixing pot. The stuff gets stirred.
I know, right? I don't know. Or maybe I just hear more film news because I'm around other filmmakers. They're talking about what's going on. Normally, I don't pay as much. Like, I'll follow the trades a little bit, but, like, I don't follow specific actor news or anything like that too much.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Mason, did you have something you wanted to say?
I was going to say, I know who that is. It's the guy from Empire. I heard about that.
There we
yes.
go.
There you
Empire.
go. Mason with the news. Mason with the news. All right, you can like this on YouTube if you're listening on the podcast. Check out the YouTube channel. This goes up as a video every single week over on Easy Game Media. You can also check out Michael's channel. I wrote down Michael's channel and said the name, but I believe it's Elsick Films.
Elskit. ELSKET.
Elskit Films. And then if you're listening on and on the website or on YouTube, don't forget to head over to iTunes to leave us a review. It's really helpful, and hit that subscribe button. And don't forget to check out our sponsor if you're interested. Crystal Elliott Designs is amazing. CE Designs, like them on Facebook, and we really appreciate them getting some stuff together so that we can do this really quickly. So with that being said, let's get into our main topic this week, guys. It's exciting. It's really fun. It's sci-fi, it's fantasy, it's both, and it's our top moments for the given movies. It was really funny doing this one because Mason really wanted to, like...
Wait, do you want to say that title again? Because I think you, like, either my headphones cut out or you totally, like, skipped over. It was, like, our favorite moments in the...
I heard it. I think your headphones cut out on you, buddy.
Oh, okay, it's my headphones. It definitely sounded like he just, like,
I can say it again. It's sci-fi.
That's how exciting it
it's
is.
fantasy.
I know, right?
And it's our favorite moments in those genres. Speaking of which, apparently my co-hosts decided they wanted to be very clear about what that genre was. And then
I'm still thinking about breaking the rules. I don't know. I'm debating what fantasy really means.
First
Well,
rule is there are no rules.
you know what was on this list though? Like, so I pulled up the Rotten Tomatoes top 100, and like A Wonderful Life was on the top 100 list for sci-fi, and I'm like, this is not
Well, it was that list was fantasy and sci-fi,
Right.
and It's a Wonderful Life could be classified as a fantasy movie.
See what I'm saying? Let me do my movie.
I don't even know what
I
it
do.
is.
I just need- I
don't
just need to
remember
go
which of you
ahead.
had it, but whoever had The Dark Knight, I do take. That's not a sci-fi or a fantasy movie. That's a crime
yeah.
drama.
I
At
mean,
me
we
next
could
time.
consider Elf a fantasy movie, right? Like a
So I'm
Christmas
saying-
It
movies
is a
with
fantasy
actual
movie.
Christmas definitely
The
have
There
reality
Will Be Blood is a
that world
fantasy
is
movie.
insane.
Okay. With that being said, we're not being too stringent or it's fine. We let them use what they wanted. And Mason, yours is first. Why
Oh,
don't
is
you-
it?
Yeah, you're first.
I'm so lucky.
Why don't you go ahead and give us your top one or two?
So I tried to pick one from like each genre, so that's how I kind of interpreted it. So for my sci-fi, I chose Arrival. So there's a scene in Arrival, and to be fair, it's been a year and a half since I've seen the movie, so pardon me if I get this wrong here. But essentially, they're talking about the way that people communicate throughout the world, and they're talking about how people, when they dream differently depending on how you learned what language you speak, because you process information differently and you communicate differently. And as such, your brain works differently when you're asleep to process dreams because of that. I don't know how true that actually is, but I thought it was a really cool idea. And it was a really cool concept I never thought of, and actually got me to like stop and think about it. And at the moment, I was watching the movie on my computer, and I paused and I was like, I wonder if that's true or not. It got me to look into it. So that was my number one sci-fi moment. Probably not on anyone else's list or close to it, but
So
I think it's
Actually,
a cool
there
thing.
was I mean, I couldn't. It's
Hmm?
me. I could never narrow it down. But Arrival is one of the films that I had as potentials on there. But it was like specifically the moment at the end when she, like, after the kind of like dream realization, when she decides to like still be with Jeremy Renner's character, and like saying that like the trials and the difficulties in life are what make it so important, and like choosing to experience that anyway, even if you do know the future, or do like there were a lot of really crazy themes, and really I love that movie. So it's
Yeah,
a
I
great
actually
movie.
I like to tell people that movie's the good version of Interstellar, because I think they have like really similar pacing and like tones, and I just think that Arrival delivers better throughout the entire movie. But
yeah, I definitely like Arrival more than Interstellar, but I would say that the better Interstellar is actually Event Horizon. I don't know if any of you have seen that movie.
I have not.
Sounds super
Nope.
Oh,
familiar.
it's nuts. It's yeah, it's I think it's Dennis Quaid, I think. Basically, it's the same plot as Interstellar, but instead of being like weird, sappy fourth dimension at the end, it goes into like this really crazy horror movie, like that seems like way more like what would happen if you started venturing around weird black
Seems to be on
holes. Or,
Netflix, maybe.
I'm not sure. It might be on Netflix. It's from like the early '90s, I think.
Mason,
So you can
oh
find it.
sorry. I was gonna say that moment actually impacted me too, because when we walked on the movie, we talked about that, and I mentioned to some of my coworkers who I saw the movie with that I have never had a dream in first person, and they were like, "Wait, what?" It's like, yeah, all my dreams are like third person, like TV, like TV episodes.
Huh. Interesting.
So I
don't
see
know if I've ever
I
had-
see myself in all of my dreams,
That's strange because I almost am never me in my dreams.
and I also have never had a dream that I wasn't in.
So wait, hang on. Just to process this correctly, Spencer, you've only ever had dreams in the third person watching yourself be involved in it, correct? That's what you're saying?
That is correct.
Okay, I've definitely never had a dream where I wasn't involved. If that makes sense. Like I don't. At least how about this? I don't remember a time wherever I had that happened, but I never even thought about someone having a dream where they're not involved in it. which is interesting and probably narcissistic, but interesting.
He's saying he's narcissistic, not that you're narcissistic.
Yeah, no, I'm saying that like I'm narcissistic in the idea that I would never not be in my own dreams. Does that make sense? Like the idea that you wouldn't be involved in your own dreams just blew my mind because I never even thought about that.
Suppose that it's not that I'm not involved in my dreams, it's that I'm always the protagonist and probably a combination of multiple protagonists from a fantasy or like science fiction mashup. Like that's the vast majority of my dreams.
My dreams
like,
are
I'm
almost
both Harry
never
Potter
that exciting.
and Gandalf.
Yeah, my dreams are almost never that exciting. Well, anyway, thought you would enjoy that, Mason. When I saw that on your list, I thought I'd throw that at you. What is your second moment?
All right, so here's the question right now. How are we defining fantasy? I need to know. Can I be abstract in my definition of fantasy?
Go for it.
Yes, please.
Love it. Thank you guys for giving the go-ahead. That's 2 for 1. So, and There Will Be Blood.
Okay, you have a really good explanation for this.
My favorite movie, or second, depending on how you want to define favorite movie. It's a classic scene. There's 2 classic scenes. There's the one where he talks about the milkshake and suffrage that everyone always knows, where he says, "I drink your milkshake." But my favorite scene, I think, is there's a moment where he's got his oil rig and it's just starting to go in. He's got it set up on the town, and they did this big grand opening for the oil rig, and then everything goes to kaplooey, and there's explosions and fires, and his boy goes flying when the oil explodes, and he lands over there, and he has to like try and save everything, and he's trying to save his boy, and then eventually maybe an hour or 2 later, because the oil rig gets burning constantly, and this is back in the gold rush days, so they're not able to put the fire out, and he's sitting there and he's watching the fire, and his friend walks up to him, or his coworker, and goes, "How's HW doing?" And he goes, "Not well." And he just keeps watching the fire burn as his kid's like dying behind him, and I think it's one of the most impactful movies. It's called There Will Be Blood. It's one of the best movies ever. You should watch it.
It's really incredible, but I'm still failing to see how you even remotely attach this to a
that is a
movie.
fictional story. It was fantasy.
That's
not how that works.
Mason, I see why you're confused.
I regret giving you the go-ahead on that one.
Fantasy is a subset of fiction, like squares are of rectangles.
Squares are rectangles. Cool
Sure.
story, bro. But There Will Be Blood is amazing. That scene's amazing. Yeah. And I think it really goes to show his
I would say like my guess when you were I was actually a little bit close. My guess was you were going to say, "Oh brother, where art thou?"
Oh, that one also.
That is definitely like it on the surface is not a fantasy, but it's basically a retelling of the Iliad, like which kind of makes it a fantasy story. But not. No.
My argument would have been much better for that one. But my argument's foolproof now, so I don't know how it could get much better. But if you haven't seen There Will Be Blood, I think it's one of the best drama fantasies of all time.
Just slip that in there.
Obviously, it's in the category. But yeah, I don't know. I struggled with this list a little bit, and so that's kind of where I went. And earlier, someone said I couldn't do my Dark Knight thing, which is also a fantasy. I
kind of regret. I would rather you have gone with the Dark Knight.
I googled fantasy
movie,
and all the superhero movies popped up. I googled sci-fi, and a lot of them popped up.
Yeah,
that's all I'm saying.
I kind of see superhero movies as their own subgenre now. Like,
yeah, I think that's a recent change, right? Like, it didn't used to be. They used to be fantasy, and now they're superhero.
Well, I would kind of almost shift to that, where I'd say that before they were like hard. They were a hard genre, not in like difficulty. I mean, like they were their own thing. Like, yeah, it was fantasy, but like there was very much a superhero style of film that was very different from fantasy movies. And now they've shifted that to where it's kind of this mix of sci-fi and fantasy and the comic book genre. And like, I think most of them now have a new formula that is very similar. So I wouldn't say they've all branched out, but like you have that main superhero model, and then you have the offshoots like Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse or Logan or Kick-Ass or a lot of these other films that have kind of branched out from that. But
I actually thought Spider-Verse was so sci-fi. I was like,
Well, yeah, that's I think
Yeah.
part of the thing is that in this, especially because of how interconnected the universes between superhero films are, right? Like, basically, Marvel is presenting us in a world where half the time it's a fantasy story and half the time it's a science fiction story. And
Yeah.
because it's happening in a present day that has all of this additional either super smart people or super powerful people, it's also an advanced from our current day. So like it's automatically science fiction by the result of the impact of these characters in the world.
That's a great transition into what is your first moment, West?
Sure. My first moment that I think I want to tell that's pretty exciting is take yourselves back to just about anyone listening to this. It'll be a while. Some of you might be 1999, March 31st. Others, like me, it's probably going to be sometime in 2007. But think of the first time you watched The Matrix.
How is that a great transition? I was obviously talking about your other moment.
Whoa.
Oh, man.
Are we off there with
going
the
this
blood?
way? Science fiction.
Yeah, for a minute. And we're not going back.
Do your Matrix moment.
All right. So take yourself back to the time you got The Matrix. Like you watched The Matrix, but when you're like watching The Matrix, you're not understanding it. Eventually, sometimes it clicks and you start processing. I remember my moment pretty crystal clear, and that is the moment that Neo wakes up for the first time, which I think is when the lid comes off for a lot of people, but some people might be even later or earlier. Like, so Neo has eaten the pill and he's ejected from the Matrix for the first time. And the scene is incredible. It's a huge space full of vats of humans. And in terms of like a science fiction moment, that was when I was like, aha, this is a possible future. This is where the cautionary tale part of science fiction comes in, which I believe is an incredibly important aspect of that genre and is part of what makes it different than superhero movies. Mm-hmm. A good science fiction story tells you, like, here is an idea that technology can do. Let's take it as far as we can and see how we can break it. Now, once we've broken it, we're going to say, hey, here is why you need to be careful using this technology. And for this one, it's, of course, virtual reality. And in that moment, you realize, oh, you could keep people as perfectly placid, like cattle, basically, by totally tricking them into there's a virtual world. And I think that's a really important movie moment for me, and one of the like most eye-opening science fiction moments I've seen.
All right.
Definitely.
It was funny because I wasn't allowed to watch rated R films as a child.
Sure.
So the first time I watched The Matrix, I think I was 12. I think it was 2002.
Yeah, that's 2007 for me. Yep.
So the first time you watched The Matrix was in 2007?
Yeah, I was like 12. I didn't watch R-rated movies before then either.
Mine was close to that. I think it was 2011 when I first watched The Matrix. Like, I'm pretty sure that's when I saw it because I was in high school. Yeah.
Yeah, all Matrix movies were out by the time I watched The Matrix for the first time because I remember watching the rest of them in the next week after watching the first.
All right.
And then never watching any of the other two, any of the second two again.
Why do you think that moment spoke to you so much?
Part of it is that this is the best film example of this moment in science fiction I can think of, because like this is my favorite moment in all science fiction. Is the moment when the idea that the author has for why this is a future world and why this is a broken future world, which is a part of science fiction that I think is important, is that moment that they like pull it back and you see, oh, here's how this thing can be abused. And I think The Matrix is just one of the best science fiction films I've ever seen that's not tied to a book of any kind.
Fair enough. Cool. What was your next moment?
Sure. My next moment is the one that Spencer was trying to get me to lead into, which is
From
that
There Will Be Blood, which was the best fantasy film so far. Oh, okay, sorry.
If you get There Will Be Blood, I'm claiming Schindler's List. No, that's a true story.
Woof, that's joke doesn't fly.
But
What is
also
happening
a little
right
bit where
now?
we're going with this conversation. So a moment that hit me really hard was in Wonder Woman, when they finally established the not true villain of the film, but the sub-villain who was an evil scientist who was creating a super powerful weapon as a part of the Nazi war effort. And the thing that really chilled me in that moment was that an Israeli actress was poised against a Nazi scientist, which is a historical shadow of sorts, because some of the worst actions committed by anyone during the Holocaust were by Nazi scientists experimenting on Jewish people, without any accountability or intention to preserve life. And so that moment in a superhero movie kind of took me out of the bouncy feeling of the superhero movie and injected a lot of just feeling for me into that moment, and it made it a metaphor for a larger story. And the choice of Gal Gadot as the actress for Wonder Woman heavily informs why I felt that way.
So, this podcast has never had like a serious thing like that on it, you know. So for those who don't know, West is Jewish, so it makes sense that something like that would speak to you in a way that might not have resonated
Totally.
with other viewers.
It was a piece of subtext for sure, but it's I don't know. It is an interesting aspect of making films set around World War II in general. And there's a number of superhero films that start characters in World War II. Captain America is a World War II hero, and the way that they chose to do Wonder Woman was that as well. And I don't think that I think they touched closer to that aspect of World War II in Wonder Woman than they did in Captain America.
All right.
So it was a really interesting choice, and one that brought gravity to an Israeli person being represented in media.
Cool. That's really emotional, and thank you for sharing, West. With that being said, I don't have a great transition for this, so Michael, why don't you go next?
So I mean, I'm the film guy, so obviously I had like a top 20 that I couldn't narrow down. And so I think I'm going to go with first of it, like Annihilation. If any of you have seen that, is a really, really awesome movie. It's basically Natalie Portman and Tessa Thompson, and I'm blanking on the other two actresses' names, but there's this alien object that crashes to Earth, and this dome starts spreading, and everything inside the dome is experiencing like rapid genetic mutation.
Oh, I really wanted to see this.
Yeah, if you didn't get to see it in theaters, like it's a tragedy because it was so meant to be seen on a big screen. Like it's absolutely gorgeous, but also just like as a sci-fi movie it's just a concept that doesn't like get played with very much and is so well constructed, and the characters are really well done, even the more supporting characters, but specifically the moment in it is at the very end. And since you guys haven't seen it yet, I won't totally spoil it, but when they finally get to like the center and they find the object and everything comes together, it's mind-blowing, both visually and with its content and what it suggests and its themes. Like it's just one of the best endings to a sci-fi movie. And then there's also a really incredible scene which you probably saw in the trailers, which is the weird like bear creature that is one of the best horror moments that's just like nestled inside a sci-fi movie. And yeah, definitely really worth a watch if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah, I gotta see this. I remember seeing the trailer and thinking, oh man, I really want to see that. I also think Natalie Portman's just like underrated as an actress.
She is. I love her, and most of my friends know that like she's been my celebrity crush since I was like 6 years old. I saw her in The Professional, and like ever since then, just like absolutely love her. I got to meet her once actually. She's
Another
really
Israeli
cool.
woman.
Yeah, she's really awesome. I love her, and just such a brilliant like actress. Like just yeah, even even her. Uh, well, I know Spencer's pick, but even her more questionable movies,
That's not my favorite
she's
Natalie
at
Portman
least.
portrayal, but
I'll check that one up to the dialogue, to the writing on that. I won't blame her. But yeah, Annihilation is well worth a watch, and not enough people saw it when it was in theaters. And especially since they decided to, like most countries didn't even get it in theaters, it went straight to Netflix, which was a tragedy because yeah, that film needs to be seen on the biggest screen possible with the best sound system.
okay. I will have to check that out. The listeners, if you haven't seen that, go get a projector and take Michael's word for it.
Right.
I actually have friends that I could probably set up a movie night for that. So, what is your second one, Michael?
Well, like I said, I like really couldn't narrow it down, so I cheated, and I'm gonna like briefly mention one, and this is the one that's like probably closest to pushing like that. It's a sci-fi sort of, but Doctor Strangelove. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen that.
Woo!
Doctor Strangelove and how I learned to stop worrying, or how I learned to love the bomb. I never remember the full title, even though I watched that movie like a couple times a year. I love that movie. But at the towards the end, there's a scene where this general who's basically like intentionally causing Armageddon gives a speech. He's been cornered by the military, and they're coming to stop him, and he delivers this speech that is such an insight into the military industrial complex, into how we treat soldiers and PTSD, into it's heavily talking about toxic masculinity and how we view the military and what it means to be a man and being a soldier, and just absolutely incredible. And if you haven't watched it, it's my favorite of Stanley Kubrick's films. It's absolutely incredible. And everybody at least knows one scene, which is the cowboy riding the bomb as it falls to earth and waving his hat. But I'm definitely cheating a lot here. But my pick that I wanted to talk about more was actually Blade Runner. Both 1 and 2, because they're both absolutely incredible. But as far as specific moments, like obviously there's have you guys seen both the Blade Runner movies?
I haven't seen either, and the reason that I haven't seen either is because I really, really wanted to see the second one, and I hadn't seen the first one yet, and I haven't gotten a chance to get the first one to watch it so that I could watch the second one.
I own it. I will loan it to you. But that being
Yes,
said,
that's what we're doing on Sunday.
nice. Yes. That being said, for those of you out there, if you also struggle to find Blade Runner, it was on Netflix for a while. I'm not sure if it still is.
It is not.
Oh, that's too bad. But you don't have to have seen the original Blade Runner to watch 2049.
Somebody told me that, but I felt like I wouldn't appreciate the first one as much if I watched the second one first.
I wouldn't even say that. I think they are connected, and there are certain things that you'll appreciate more, but they do a good enough job of kind of not explaining, but at least giving you an insight into who the characters are from the first one. So it's mostly like little things that you'll miss if you don't see it. But yeah, we'll definitely watch it on Sunday, because I absolutely love the original Blade Runner film. It's tough to pick, but it's probably my favorite Harrison Ford movie, but it's not my favorite Harrison Ford performance, if
Sure.
that makes sense. Like,
Mason, have you
I
seen Blade
love
Runner?
that movie.
Yeah, I've seen Blade Runner.
Did
Yeah.
you like both of them?
I have not seen the second one yet, but I saw the first one. Trey
Yeah.
Trey has the second one. We're supposed to watch it, but I'm not sure when.
It's really good. I have a hard time picking between the two because they're also like they satisfy different things for me. Anyway, but the most famous scene in Blade Runner is when Rutger Hauer delivers this speech at the end, and it's raining, and he talks about basically like all the suffering and all the things that he has experienced when you die disappears like tears in the rain. And it's this really gorgeous speech that he delivers. But since that's kind of one that anyone who's seen Blade Runner, that's the scene they think of, I actually wanted to talk about the scene in Blade Runner 2049, which is since you guys haven't seen it, I can't spoil anything since I know we're going to watch it. But there's a scene where one of the characters dies, and it's just incredibly impactful, and you're not expecting a character like that to be impactful when they die. And that's something that I really like about sci-fi, is that it can explore not necessarily diversity, but just individuals and concepts that are so unique or very rarely thought about in very interesting ways that you won't get from really any other genre. Like sometimes horror will delve into that a little bit, but that's typically more on the psychological aspect, versus sci-fi, which can really deal with like societal issues, technological issues. Like sci-fi, I love sci-fi because it just is this massive playground where you can dive into literally any topic you want, no matter how taboo it is, and do it in a very unique and creative way that will get people thinking, like Arrival, like Blade Runner and Annihilation, and like even Jurassic Park, which was the other one that I was going to put up there, but it's such a popular movie that I figure I'd talk about ones that people probably haven't seen.
Yes.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of science fiction is that it takes humanity out of context, and allows, but gets to put on the human condition on display. You can talk about how people are and how people behave without discussing events that either really happen or have happened yet, so no one really knows. So the only conversation is hypothetical, but it's a really vivid hypothetical.
Yeah. And it definitely allows things to be a lot more palatable that, you know, people normally wouldn't think about.
I think that sci-fi and fantasy, Mason, are probably your least favorite genres.
I guess, I don't know. It's like I would say horror probably is, to be honest.
That's good. That's my least favorite too, for different reasons.
I just honestly don't have a lot of moments that are really memorable. Like when asked to do this, I was just kind of like, like I spent a lot of time thinking and a lot of time like looking up movies and like trying to think of something in that moment.
No, that's fine. Well, I also know that like you're not like in love with Star Wars, so that like, you know that.
Yeah, I feel obligated to watch the movies, not like I want to watch the movies.
Right, which I wanted to, I think that's important to note, that you were willing to do a topic like this that didn't, necessarily speak to you. It spoke to me. I'm really excited for my turn now.
About Star Wars, presumably?
So I will start with a Star Wars film, and I will actually start with the worst Star Wars film.
There Will Be Blood.
That is the worst Star Wars film, to be fair. Like that. Actually,
Not
you
even
could
on
probably
genre.
set There Will Be Blood in Space and like make it about like harvesting asteroids, and it would be a really awesome Star Wars movie. It'd be
Daniel
really
Day-Lewis
but yeah.
is the Emperor. And if you didn't know, it's all set up for that. But since you can keep going.
Yeah, so when I say the worst Star Wars film, I actually think that Attack of the Clones is the worst Star Wars film. I think
It is.
It is. I'm glad.
It is.
But I actually think that the reason that Hayden Christensen got hired is actually for a scene in this film that I think that he did a really, really good job in. And that is the moment on Anakin's face when his mother Shmi dies. Spoiler alert. But it's really interesting. You see this. I took this scene so differently than everybody else, because when you think about Anakin as a character, one of the tragedies of Anakin Skywalker is that the Jedi could have prevented all of this had they not like warped their own philosophies over hundreds and hundreds of years and warped the Jedi code over hundreds and hundreds of years for no reason at all. Like they changed their religion and nobody really knows why. And George Lucas kind of talks about how Anakin's struggle is that he wants to be a good Jedi, but he has these emotions that are against the rules. And anger is one of those emotions. And so when he feels anger towards his mother dying, he's mad for multiple reasons. He's mad that his mother's dead, this person that raised him as a slave on Tatooine. And then he's mad that he's mad. He's like, I'm not supposed to feel this way. And he doesn't know how to handle it because he's never been taught how to handle that, how to handle loss, because why would he have to be taught that as a Jedi? And so he kind of explodes. And the look on Hayden's face in that scene, and it's really funny that people don't like that next scene to me, where he talks about how he slaughtered them like animals, because it's like the best acting in like all of it for Hayden
in his career.
Like it's so like real, and it feels like he meant it. And I also thought that it was like the best moment for Natalie Portman to like be like, oh wow, this is actually like good acting. Let me try and do something with this. In like that whole movie, it's like it's in my opinion one of its only redeeming qualities. As far as like I still love it, so I should just shut up. But it's somebody who grew up in a very religious home where I was taught that certain things that I felt were wrong and I shouldn't feel them. I really relate to Anakin in lots of ways. Like obviously I'm not gonna go murder a bunch of children like he did, but I understood like how I understood how taking a young child and teaching them these things that lead him to one at some point think the Jedi are evil makes a lot of sense, and it's like one of the moments in Anakin's character arc that I think is the most real, and it was impactful to me. So
And that's why the Jedi suck.
Yeah, the seed of Anakin's trip to the dark side is in that moment because because the Jedi Order wouldn't open themselves to his action there and his feeling there, right? Like I think that the seed there grows into why the Jedi Order is no longer for Anakin.
I think so. I think that people don't understand what happened in that scene, and so oftentimes it gets made fun of. It's like, actually, this makes a lot of sense if you take more than 5 seconds to think about it.
And part of where that scene gets enhanced is if you've watched Clone Wars at all.
Yes.
Because Anakin they have screen time to show Anakin's not evil yet, but experiencing like these tough interactions with his teachings and his reality.
Yeah.
And processing that is a challenge for him.
Michael?
Well, I think you brought up something that's kind of important there, which, well, I don't know about important, but it's the reason why I would agree that that's probably his best acting in the two films, but I just, from a filmmaking perspective, why that probably didn't connect with a lot of people is because how they play that and the amount of time it takes to build and how they build that up. Like they don't do a good job of building up to that moment. And so it didn't, to most audiences, they're not going to connect to that. Where if you have the whole backstory, and I think this is the reason I bring this up is to relate it to Marvel versus DC, which is, everyone's favorite topic. But Marvel took their time to build up certain characters so that when they had certain developments or character turns, they could do that and it would be believable, versus DC, where they just kind of throw it at you and suddenly there's this character change, or they make a decision that would go against their typical character. And I think that is not, I think DC is a lot worse at it, surprisingly, in a lot of ways. But I think that's why a lot of movies that have the typical hero arc don't work. Well, the reason why a lot of those ones don't work, there are plenty of hero archetypes that do work, but I think that the films that fail, it's often because they don't properly take the time to build up those heroes so that they and establish their flaws and their emotions so that it can fail. I think that they did a better job with Anakin of building up his resistance to the Jedi, but it was played more as almost like and part of this maybe because they jumped from very small Anakin to kind of an older teenager, of just like, it seemed very juvenile. It was never, it didn't seem to have that emotional depth and complexity that drawing that conclusion would need.
Yeah,
you know?
this is Oh, go ahead, Mason.
No. You say what you're gonna say. I had a revelation though during all of this.
Yeah.
I figured out why I hate Star Wars.
So, oh, wow.
That's pretty great.
So I think that one of the biggest problems that the prequels face is dropping things rather than going through things. So like his conflicts with Obi-Wan are just hinted at, right? You just skip 10 years, you drop in, I sometimes fight with my master because I'm better than him, and like why does that matter? Like, just shut up and listen to your teacher, right? And like the problem is they do that throughout the prequels a lot. They just like, oh, let me drop this, and you're supposed to weave those things together. You're expected to be like Spencer and to like just devour every piece of Star Wars content so that you have the ability to weave those things together so that you get that moment. And that's like not fair to the audience.
Yeah, and I think a lot of movies these days do that. They expect, it's one side or the other. They either expect the audience to like just assume these things and follow along because there's been comic books, or like, I really hate when it's like, well, you know, if you, especially with book adaptations, where they say like, oh, well, if you've read the books, you're probably really going to like this, but if you haven't, like, stay away. Like most recently, Mortal Engines, the Peter Jackson film, was like that, where like if you read the book, then there was a lot more to get out of it because you could just draw the conclusions that they left blank. But like for me, who didn't read the books, it just did not make sense, and it was a complete mess. And a lot of films do that these days, where they're just like, here's an IP, here's either a rushed origin story or a way too drawn out origin story that like we do not need. And
Well,
I yeah,
to origin stories, I mean, that's the reason the prequels were made, is to tell exactly one story. How come Vader, right?
Yeah,
That's what we wanted to know. How did we get to Darth Vader? And because the prequels have to work
Anakin is Darth Vader?
Oh,
I know, right?
Spoiler.
Spoiler.
you on.
Why did they waste so many time with other characters then and not focus on these other moments?
But
Sorry.
because instead of like drawing a thread through from the beginning of a story to the end, the thread was already they're like pulling it from the end.
Yeah.
Like they knew the destination, but they kind of fumbled the beginning, right?
Sure.
So sometimes they had to push moments forward in ways they weren't ready for because they knew they only had so much time to achieve this end.
Mason, is that why you hate Star Wars?
No, that's not. It was just an observation I made. I figured out why I hate Star Wars, or maybe this might not be all of it, but it's definitely part of it, and it's something that I didn't really figure out. Maybe I always knew it, but I just didn't know how to put into words. And that is that the Jedi and the Sith just need like a therapist and need to learn how to like work through their emotions, and then there'd be like none of this, because the Jedi are like these autonomous beings that like believe they're better than emotions. They like think that like you need to pull these kids so they don't develop emotions so they can't have them later, because that leads you to the dark side, and the dark side just like indulges them too much. And it's just so annoying actually like hearing that. It's just like, wait, he's bad because he's sad because his mom died and he wants revenge, which like is like bad to want to kill someone, but like you could work through these things, but instead of wanting to work through them, the Jedi are just like, nah, don't worry about it. It's just very frustrating.
So you're actually getting into like the whole complexity of why the Jedi are bad. And like that's kind of what Yoda was saying in literally the last film. Anyway, I could talk Star Wars all day.
The Jedi suck.
Well, speaking of, that's actually one of the things that like, it's one of the things about The Last Jedi that I liked, was that I didn't quite like how they handled it, but I liked what they were trying to go for, which was that whole like neither of them, because one of the other things on my list was with The Last Jedi, the Red Throne Room fight sequence, and like Rey and Kylo.
I felt like if I did that one, it would have like been too much, but it is actually the best fight scene of all time. Just gonna say.
Well, no, another one on my list, The Princess Bride, gets that one. I still take the rooftop or the
You're
cliff
both
top.
wrong.
The,
And there will be
Hard to
blood.
argue with the Princess Leia.
enough. Read the room. Like,
I can't. I'm sorry. I'm dyslexic.
yeah, no, but in The Last Jedi, they were building up to Kylo gives this big long speech about like how both of them are kind of bad and they're both wrong and they should kind of go on their own way. And I really liked that, and I thought that that's where it was building to, which was that either that they would split off and both kind of decide that neither was good, or that they would join forces and be this like reuniting kind of force, at least for a little while, because obviously we need more movies. It's Disney. But like then they kind of just they started to do that, and then it was just, well, they're back to where they started. You know, Rey's not quite a Jedi, but she's still a Jedi, and you know, Kylo's at the Emperor now, I guess. Like,
I don't think they're
let's
back
see.
to where they started. I think that like that moment where like he's trying to see her through the Force, and she's like, "No, I'm not talking to you right now," clearly says that they're not done.
Well, not when I say back at where they started, I don't mean for their characters. Their characters have grown, but I'm talking about from a storytelling perspective. That my biggest issue with The Last Jedi, which I think a lot of people missed in why they hated it, and there were plenty of things to dislike about that movie, but I think that the biggest issue of why people didn't like it is because none of it mattered. It, for the most part, every story arc that started ended kind of putting them with slight character development, but in the overall arc of the story made very little progress. And
Yeah,
so it didn't
every time
feel
the
like it
ante was-
mattered as much.
Every time the ante was upped in that game, it felt like they lost everything.
Yeah, which I normally like movies that like make the heroes lose. Like I do like that, but I think that if you're going to, I think with so many things in The Last Jedi, they were a lot of really great concepts and ideas and things to explore, but then they didn't follow through. They just kind of said, look, this is a thing we can briefly touch on and then move on. And it felt like it lacked any form of resolution. And I've had people who said like, well, it's just the second one in this trilogy. And it's like, yeah, but even in Empire, like there were cliffhangers, there were things we were concerned about, but like the story within that film is still concise and wrapped up. And that's another thing with Marvel films, is that like we have lots of this connective thread that goes from movie to movie and teases new things, but within each film, with a few exceptions, they do manage to wrap up that story completely, and then they just leave a few things to dangle in front of you, and there's still a sense of accomplishment or at least resolution, versus I feel like where The Last Jedi went wrong was that there were a lot of half measures that didn't give a satisfying enough conclusion. Like, I hate people who sit there and just argue about like whether or not it was the right thing to do, or whether it was with Star Wars lore or whatever dumb anecdotal things. But like for me, I really enjoyed that movie. But from a storytelling perspective, I think that there were a lot of things that did not have satisfying resolutions within that contained story. Talking more of like subplots and, you know, not so much thematic things and larger connective tissue.
Yes, Mason.
If they had done it like Kingdom Hearts and called it Star Wars 7.5, do you think you'd have liked the movie more than if it was
Jesus
Star Wars
Christ,
8?
no.
All right.
All right. Well, let's move on to as we got to get off Star Wars because we could just do it all day. Let's move on to one of the most underrated fantasy films of all time. One of my personal favorites. What? Oh, do you agree with this?
Yeah, There Will Be Blood.
Oh my gosh.
This is so easy. Set me up.
No, it's not.
okay.
There Will Be Blood. It's Willow.
I've never seen this movie.
The baby between George Lucas. Come on, you've never seen Willow?
I'm Googling it.
Neither
right
have
now.
I.
It's Spencer, like I grew up with that movie, but I can promise you I've had that. How are you just figuring this out? People have not seen Willow. Like, I love this movie. But
This is literally.
so
I mean, I know.
It looks so bad.
Oh my gosh. So,
that front box looks like the stereotypical thing.
It's
I don't know. I know
it
the
is
movie's
it
bad,
is
but the box art looks just like the stereotypical
yeah.
female
It's bad.
man, main character, bad guy.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it's also
It's
from 1988.
It's
It literally
Marvel's
invented
Photoshopped
the
posters
stereotype.
before they existed. Like that style of poster is where like we get the current
Yeah, it
Photoshop
literally
model of
is a
just, like,
George-
slap a bunch of dudes on there.
Exactly. It's literally the George Lucas. Oh my gosh.
Jim Henson.
Uh,
Or not Jim Henson. It wasn't it produced by the Henson
oh, I
production
was.
company though.
Directed by Ron Howard. I can tell you
Yeah.
that.
The whole thing is Steven Spielberg. Like it was glorious. And the thing that I wanted to highlight is the moment when Mad Mardigan and Willow save Allura, but some fairy dust makes it a little bit harder. And in this scene, you go from like, oh, they find Allura and they're gonna save her, and then Mad Mardigan sees the princess and he's like, "My love," and like he like wakes her up. She's asleep to like profess his love to her while they're trying to save the baby. And the thing about this, and then like there's this awesome fight scene, and the whole thing. Like one of my favorite things about Willow is it came in the time where people just loved movies. And they like the film wasn't trying to take itself super seriously, and the people watching weren't taking it super seriously, and they didn't have to worry about that, and they could just be silly and fun. It's actually one of the things I love so much about Thor Ragnarok. It's like this thing where it's like, guys, we're watching a movie about Thor in space as a slave. Like, come on, it's ridiculous. Like let's let that be a story and not this thing that we have to microanalyze. And I actually think Willow does a good job of like not like what is there to microanalyze? Like it's just like this really fun adventure that was cool. And that moment with the brownies and with Mad Mardigan and with like the whole thing is just that moment in that film is perfect. Like Mad Mardigan like starts flinging his sword around him and he's like, "Dude, you are amazing," and then he drops it and he's like, "You're an idiot." Like the whole sequence is beautiful, all the way to Mad Mardigan going down the hill as a giant snowball.
Okay, I just have to interrupt right here and apologize to everybody because this is a really fantastic fantasy movie that I love deeply, and that was a terrible pitch to watch it. Like that was you were just describing like the worst B movie ever, where like none of that. Like I've seen Willow so many times, and that did not make sense to me.
Dude, it is the point I'm trying to get across is that we take movies too seriously, and the thing about Willow is I watched it so many times as a kid, never trying to take anything seriously, but just simply trying to appreciate like this awesome film that was really cool from George Lucas and from Steven Spielberg. Like it's quite good. That scene is very good at showing what I'm trying to talk about. And Mason, what is your thought?
I have a question. Is there a lot of babies in this movie? Because I'm looking through images and like every other one's a baby.
There is one baby in this movie.
It's about the movie is about that baby.
Okay. Every other scene in IMDb though is like that baby, and I'm just like,
argue that
baby is
point.
the
It's not about the baby. My sister's named after this movie, but it is not about the baby. It is very much about like this is. If you want to see like, you guys know who Warwick Davis is, right?
I do now because I'm looking at IMDb.
He
Okay.
played the main Ewok in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, and he's in Harry
Potter.
He's in Harry Potter. He's been in a ton of stuff. But this was like one of his first, if I'm remembering correctly, right?
It was his first lead film. And,
his first lead film.
And he was 18 years old.
Yeah, but like he plays like a 40-year-old dad. And but he's really fantastic, and it's about this guy's journey learning to be confident in himself, and the reason, and this is why I was like, this is not a good pitch, is because this is one of the best movies that just that gives the very simplistic tale of the unexpected hero, someone who has no right to be a hero or to save the day, but just through being a good person and being brave, and it's very much based off of The Hobbit, and Bilbo and then later Frodo's journey as well, of just like that hero that has no right to be there, but just because they are so good and brave, they still save the day. And it has a lot of really awesome performances in it. Val Kilmer is just
Kilmer's
amazing.
so good.
It's the best. It's my favorite Val Kilmer performance next to like Kiss Kiss Bang Bang. He's really brilliant. But it's also just like a pure, like we've been talking a lot about like sci-fi or sci-fantasy, but this is a pure fantasy movie. Like it is just knights and monsters and quests, and yeah, it's a really awesome movie, but it is very 80s. It's very 80s. So you have to take some of the special effects with a grain of salt. But that being said, like I saw this when I was really little, and for that time, the effects were incredible. But looking back now, like oof, it's interesting.
He's in Star Wars Episode 1, Warwick Davis.
Yes, he is.
He's in an amazing number of Star Wars movies. If you look closer,
He's
Yeah,
been in all of the new ones, I think, as various characters.
I just looked through his IMDb, all the pictures.
He
But
was
the first
also in
one's him.
Solo: A Star Wars Story. He was at the end with the mercenaries. He was standing next to the main chick.
Is there a fan theory that he is like the god of that universe and that's why he's in all the movies? Because if there's not, there should be.
Yeah, that's
No,
what I was gonna say. I
R2D2
haven't
is the
heard
main
that,
character
but,
of Star Wars. Everybody knows that.
right.
common thread.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Warwick Davis is an incredible actor, and Willow is probably my favorite film
Yeah.
of his.
Yeah, I love Willow so much. That moment, though. Anyway, going back to like why I love that moment so much. I think like when I was little, all of the things that like capture you as a child is something that is important to me in a film. Like I love that like the things that capture you are the things that capture you. And you know, when you're little, that movie took me and put me into another world for its time, and I thought it was funny. I thought it was lighthearted. I thought it was, it was an amazing story, and that moment captured, that sequence captured a lot of things for me. So I'll send you the sequence so that you can laugh at it, Mason.
It's pretty incredible, and like minus the snowball part, the
snowball
fight scene, the fight scene leading up to the Val Kilmer as a snowball is incredible.
And they jump on the shield and go down the hill.
Yeah, they definitely end. They escape by sliding on a shield down a hill, and then like turning into a snowball and bashing
Is that
through.
the first time that trope showed up?
Maybe
It's the first one that I have seen, but I mean, I'm sure it's happened before.
you guys should really watch this
Yeah.
movie. It's really good. Anyway, that'll do it for this week of Need to Nerd. We got nerdy on things that weren't even in the notes, so that's exciting. Thank you, everybody, for listening. If you're get the chance, don't forget to check out both the YouTube channels. And you can find me at SpencerH on Twitter. You can find Mason at Mason E. Clark. You can find West at East Monotone. And you can find Michael on his YouTube channel. So thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll see you guys all next week.
No nerd fact. Wow.
Mason, what is our nerd fact for this week?
So Daniel Day-Lewis is actually a method actor. And so, he has to go into full character. So for the movie Lincoln, he actually lived in a log cabin just like Lincoln did for the entire time, a little bit before production and during production of the movie Lincoln.
Is that true?
So that's
Yes,
100% true.
it is.
Yeah.
All right.
And
But it was made out
on
of Lincoln
set, he
logs.
required that everybody refer to him as Mr. President.
Yep. He did the same thing with like There Will Be Blood. He was
Yeah.
like rude to like the staff and everything, and
Yeah, and he would only respond to like the character name. He would only eat and use things that were in that time period.
that's why it's the best fantasy film. The commitment to it. I don't see in Willow. It's over there eating that craft
Well,
food.
then
like,
every Daniel Day-Lewis film is.
I was going to say that the scene in Willow where the little people gather in their village was the biggest collection of little people since the Wizard of Oz for any film. So there's 2 nerd facts for this week.
Wow, 2 for 1.
Two
So
for-
powerful.
So good. So good. Blood right off all the way.